that's what people buy in the end. They buy something they value. And if you're doing the same a little better than your neighbor, you're not necessarily adding values, but you have really to understand your players, like what do they care about enough that they would perceive this value in your product.
Welcome to Mobile Growth Pancakes, a podcast by StoreMaven. We break down how and why mobile apps grow. In each episode, we invite a mobile growth expert onto the show to break down a specific mobile growth strategy, how it worked, why it worked, and what they would do differently. I'm your host, Esther Shatz. Welcome to Mobile Growth Podcast. I'm joined today by Sophie Vo. Sophie, can you introduce yourself for everyone?
Yeah, sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Sophie, and I've been working in the industry for the past 12 years. And in my experience, I worked in mostly mobile free-to-play companies. I worked in different places in Finland, in Berlin. Previously, also I worked in Berlin, went to Finland, back and forth, also in France. And among the company I worked at, Gameloft, Wuga, Rovio, and now I'm at Voodoo and leading a studio that I opened a year and a half ago in Berlin to start a new venture inside Voodoo to explore casual games, as Voodoo is more known for hyper-casual games.
Amazing. I mean, I guess before we jump into things, what led you to kind of expand past hyper-casual? Obviously, it's been a huge trend and huge success in the industry and doesn't seem to be going anywhere. What's leading you to push towards more the casual area?
Yeah, so I would say I'll answer here more also from a point of view of a company, as Voodoo very established in hyper-casual. Hyper-casual is definitely a very viable business model that came actually more in the front the past 2-3 years. And making revenue mostly from games executed really fast, released really fast, very low CPI, and revenues from ads. So that's the business model. And when we look at things in the bigger context in the market, it's very demanding, and it's not a very also high barrier of entry for hyper-casual, because once you have a hit, you release, everyone can copy you quickly because it can be executed so fast. It's not a secret tech, so it's really time sensitive. And to find what will work, you have to test a lot of ideas. So in hyper-casual also, it's very intense in the sense that every week you test many prototypes, you see what sticks, and the ones that have a low CPI and a good LTV make the business case, for a payback within a week, then are launched quickly. So in this context, then it's very demanding for companies, whether it's Voodoo or any hyper-casual company, to survive in the long term. That means you need to generate hit quickly all the time. And I can definitely say Voodoo made the success for sure, not based on luck, but with a very good network of developers who really can create great games, hyper-casual games, and release it quickly. However, it doesn't give a certain serenity in the long term, where from the moment we start to miss a hit in a month, then it starts to create a bit more insecurity, not panic, but a bit of a threat for the future, because as a contrast for casual games, as we know, like making their revenues based on long-term engagement, in-app purchase, like a really engaged audience. Once you have this hit, it can stay for years and actually support the whole company. So as a company, it makes also a lot of sense, like moving a bit away or expanding from intensity of hyper-casual, where you need to come up with a hit all the time, to something a bit more serene and long-term that could actually ensure the viability, stability of a company over years.
For sure. And I think that ties in, well with the topic you're quite familiar with. When we look at product and marketing, I mean, I think with hyper-casual, you're looking for that quick hit, right? It's a product that you kind of release out into the wild. you release your marketing, you let it run its course, and then you move on to the next thing. Whereas when you're looking at a casual game, both teams are maintaining some kind of long-term strategy. You're having releases, you're iterating on the game, you're changing your messaging, you're aiming for new audiences. How do you see how do two teams like this take it in the long run when KPIs tend to be different, the way you approach the market is different? How do you kind of marry these two concepts together?
Yeah, that's I would say a big challenge. My experience in casual games, so I definitely come with a different knowledge and even approach of launching a game when operating in a hyper casual company. And I would say there's some overlap here between casual and hyper casual, where I would say these days, I think a mentality to testing fast what you plan to launch is very key. Especially marketability is a big topic. You can have the best game in the world, but if you cannot market it, then you're done. So that's the first thing to verify really early on. And I would say this is where both join the same strategy. Like when you develop a casual game, like in our studio, when we started to prototype, the first month we were already putting it out to look at the CPI in the target market and see a signal of early performance, at least so we know that we are not starting with a niche product that will start with a high CPI and that we will never be able to make up for our payback. So that's things that we take from hyper casual. I would say where the challenge is, however, in hyper casual, you optimize everything around a low CPI. So the game, basically, you release, you need to have a good D1, D7, maybe I would say D1, D3 retention is just enough. Playtime, you put the ad system, framework, etc. But CPI, even to the cent level, can make a big difference in the revenue and the business case. So all the marketing efforts are towards optimizing CPI to the lowest level, and where also it's pretty straightforward. The creatives are basically the game. So in hyper casual, you record a rough of the gameplay, and that's basically your creative. You then maybe tweak some elements, but what you see is what you get. So it's a very straightforward marketing strategy. And as a contrast for casual games, it's not that straightforward because the game is much more complex, rich, and you just showing the gameplay may not be enough when you look at casual competition. That you don't, you show more the fantasy of the game. You show the dream of the game, the story, what it could look like after 3 years. So you show the promise in the long term. And that is also a different skill and different way of approaching marketing. And like in creatives, even in the targeting, like hyper casual is very broad. There's no targeting at all. And casual, I would argue, depending on the type of games you're making, you definitely need to know a bit about your audience, who you design the game for. And also casual is very optimized around profitability. So not just a low CPI. So I can give examples here. When we do testing on a casual game, of course, we can chase for the lowest CPI and show creatives that will have a lot of clicks, instance. But in the end, probably also we see a lower LTV engagement because it's a bit sometimes misleading. It doesn't match exactly to what the game is. And in the end, it doesn't make sense to just optimize the marketing around a lower CPI, where in the end, what you want to get is the profitability and the return of your spends. And the model here is like what the payback time, for example, in hyper casual could be under 3 days. Then you have your cash back, for example, or 7 days. And casual, you will not see your money back until a certain time. So you have to invest also a lot upfront. So it's based much more on projections, LTV estimates, like how is the curve, long-term retention of your game, and how much you are willing to invest and be patient to wait for it to come back. So this is like, I would say this is the main challenge. Like this, the sense of time is very different in hyper casual to casual. Like just the model,
absolutely.
like when you think of paybacks, like, okay, I know that I will win this back in a week, I can be serene and reuse this cash for the next game. In casual, you are more in depth for a while. Even in development, it takes a bit longer time to develop a game, where hyper casual, in a month, you have your hit. In casual, it could be, I don't know, 6 months, 12 months, depends on how long you're in soft launch to iterate the game. And it's a different mindset also in terms of financial model. And that's, I would say, where the challenge requires a bit of discussion, education, from both sides, to look at these models very differently.
So yeah, I think it's one of the things that historically challenges the ability to optimize a casual game, because you have, on the marketing side, you're looking at the performance in as real time as you possibly can, right? So sometimes you'll have an ad that, like you said, it's driving clicks, it's bringing that traffic. But if you don't have a player who's eventually, it's not the download, it's the in-app purchase, right? That's what we're looking at much more in casual. And so then you kind of have, I find, areas where it's very easy to clash, because you're saying, well, this is what brings the most market appeal, so add it into the product, and product is saying, well, this is what the product is, so update your marketing. And I think one of the questions is who gets to be the driver of that decision. When you see that there's a mismatch between what the audience is looking for and what they're actually getting in the game, who wins that battle, right? Like, how do you go through, navigate that process of, how do we create this synergy between our two sides?
It's you're touching a really, I would say, a very I would say current point that is at the lips of many marketing and product teams, because it's a constant debate. And that's also in the phase we are in at the moment. We will get in soft launch, where we have also often regularly these debates, like, okay, this is on product side, this is what we want to show, but on marketing, we have to look at performance. And of course, it's not black and white, and a good middle ground we have found. And I think it's a way as well to go, where you have to look at a different strategy, marketing strategy, and the performance of these different strategies. So let's say in a game, casual, that attracts a female audience, simulation audience, and you use the known marketing strategy, so higher CPI probably, but like the creative resonates with the audience. They see what is the fantasy of the game. They are engaged in other similar products, and no surprises when they get in the game, and they will probably engage and spend, etc. So that's kind of a track we know. And I think one that is a good opportunity to consider, and we see as well, even big companies like Playrix, others as well, trying all type of ads, but we could look at it and like, oh, it looks misleading. And then the strategy is to add the mini games of the creatives inside the game, so then people can actually find it. It's a patch. I don't know how much it performs, but it's a patch that I would say could make sense. I would love to experiment that more to understand how it works. And I think what is important here, where now I look at more ad revenues, like maybe you will, in your strategy of expansion in marketing, you will acquire maybe lower quality of players, like with the lower CPI creatives that are like drive traffic, installs. But maybe the way these people will engage with the product is also at the level of the CPI. So I mean by that, in the same way of hyper casual models, maybe they will engage with ads very early on, and this would be even better to have actually segmented journeys in the game based on the player behavior. So let's say these cores that are acquired more in hyper casual way with some creatives that are not exactly the game. Maybe they will play for 3 days, but they engage a lot with ads, and maybe then they pay back for the cost. So I think there are some opportunistic segments to look at when you try to acquire a different audience. And then it's just about looking at the performance of each and see which one makes sense, finding like the sweet spot, So I'm quite open, I would say, on being on product side, to definitely try a lot of things on marketing to lower the CPI. But then we have to really look at the performance of the segments and how do we monetize for different strategies. So maybe in-app purchase is not the way for this, maybe lower quality core, like when I say lower quality in-app purchase, but maybe ads, for example, being exposed to a lot of ads could be then a strategy that works better.
So basically you're finding the balance of, what marketing trends can teach you combined with what's actually happening in the product. Where is it possible to adjust the product versus where is it, this is not an area that we're able, if we're not able to create an ad-based structure, that's not how the game is working, then all right, it's great that this has the best CPI, but it's not going to cut it for kind of how we move forward. I think that makes a lot of sense of having both sides be able to adapt to some kind of medium where it's not just product saying, bring me this type of user now, and this is the product, and this is what you have, and it's not marketing saying, well, this is who's coming, and then figure it out and make it work. Which I think makes a lot of sense. Let's talk a little more about the process of launching a game, because I think it's something that a lot of companies fall into two categories. One is they spend very little work kind of optimizing that soft launch phase, or they'll focus entirely on product or entirely on marketing. Or you have companies who can get stuck in years long soft launch, or constantly pushing back the roll date. What do you think is the right way to make this process efficient? What are the things you need to answer in a soft launch before you're ready to move to hard launch?
Yeah, it's a very a very also tricky question. I think in both definitely strategy works, but I would say at the very beginning, I like to approach product development always like, what are your riskiest assumptions? So when you start a product, if you go like completely brand new, then what do you need to verify quickly? Let's say for something very innovative that is not really proven, I would definitely test from the beginning the marketing appeal, because then you start to set on a theme, art style, setting, and then you don't want to do risking at the end of the journey when you find out that your game is just too expensive or players too expensive to acquire.
Basically, you want to make sure you don't spend a ton of money developing a game that doesn't have the market appeal to justify that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think the product market fit is really important at the beginning. And of course, I wrote a piece about that, but it's not because you have a low CPI at the beginning that you have a guarantee to have it low later in development, 6 months or 12 months after when you develop it, right? So it is not at all a guarantee. However, it's very clear that if you start with a high CPI, there's a little chance that when you try again, that it will be much lower, so at least it helps to eliminate early or concepts that might be a little too niche or too oversaturated, but you're competing directly, against big players, and you will not match here the spend in marketing or even like the ability to have a better product. So that's something I would test early on, no matter what is the situation. And I think then there are different schools, of course, of soft launching and where you go like quick and dirty and you release, and then maybe you crash in the way because you're not set, unfortunately, to scale the game and operate it for years in live ops, or then you're patching it. And I've worked on games like that where they were launched quickly. And then I was part of unfortunate live ops teams, like look at the quality and refactoring everything just to make it work. And it's not fun for the teams coming after. So I think here it's important, what is the time sensitivity to define that. So if you're working on something really, really innovative, I don't know, supercell model, and you're confident that this is something that will be big, no matter what the time, the trend, because you are bringing something really new, maybe it's worth taking the time. But when there's a trend, I don't know, like for a while there was like all these hybrid titles were start to launch. There are also an emergence of merge games. I would argue here that being before or in the party is quite important, because after a while, if the market gets saturated with the new trend, then you end up as well with a very high CPI.
I think there's an example you just reminded me of. You mentioned Playrix, so they have the famous ads, I guess, in our industry now, of the mini games of kind of to save the girl and help her out. And I think it was maybe it was a year ago, maybe it was less, where a studio launched an entire kind of game concept around save the girl. Yes. That's time sensitive, right? Because you're looking to kind of capitalize on this trend that Playrix kind of established, and they soared to the top of the charts as soon as they did. So that's something where you're saying you have to be stricter with yourself about time, and you can iterate after and optimize after.
Yeah. So you have to know if time is actually a factor here of success or not. And if it is, you have to be pragmatic, launching quickly. I mean, even we find ourselves as well, like not like taking too much time and trying to over polish everything and launching and just having good enough basically to get ready and scale the game. And also the other thing to keep in mind is I think also about team motivation. And I have like in my team, I have people who have worked, in big companies like Google, King, and after a while, some of them, of course, are tired to work on games for 1-2 years, and these games didn't launch, and they just worked on 1 or 2 titles over the past 5 years, and it's exhausting. And now there's more hunger, I would say, to release and test a lot of game out, see what happens, and invest in a game if one like shows traction. So I think there's also another dynamic now where game teams are a bit tired actually of this long journey where you're not sure, and do you have the energy to go for another round again, like almost like console development, but console development, you ship the game eventually. Free to play is like you work, you invest in, and then you stop, and it's really hard emotionally. Yeah.
Such a good point. I don't think I've ever heard anyone bring up internal, like you have KPIs that you decide on measuring, but it's a really good point that if you're going to have a great game and one that can maintain a life cycle, you need a team to support it. And if they have no energy left, and I've hit, we've worked with a lot of apps in concept who we all hit that stage of just like, this game again. I can't believe we're still not live and we're still hitting these. It's really important. If you can't keep people excited about a game, there's no promise of the end, right? It's not like no matter what, at the end of the day, you have a game that really hits. You might never launch. You might never launch well. You might get scrapped, really soon after. It's demoralizing. A very good point. Do you ever worry about, when it comes to kind of earlier testing, do you worry at all about exposure and kind of the audience being, seeing a game before it's ready, when it's in a rougher stage, before you've prepared press announcements? What's that like?
I think it's always like a risk. And there are different practices in the industry where you launch under, like a dark label, and, where it's not like the brand of the company, but it's just, even like some of us, we launch on our developer account. So for example, I have myself also a developer account, and we test quickly ideas like that. So there's some mitigation, but not fully ways of preventing it, especially in hyper casual. There's a lot of watch, from studios to each other to know the accounts and copy quickly. So the thing is, in hyper casual, it makes a lot of sense. It's very strategic. If you can copy earlier than your competitors, see what they are testing, you test the same thing within a week, and you can steal the opportunity in a way. I would say for casual games, you can still get the idea early, but the more, and that's what I would advise when approaching a product development, especially a game that can last for years. Don't try to copy the neighbor, because in the end, you're just competing directly. It's easy to replicate and copy. And for each team, really to identify what is your competitive advantage. It could be in the tech, in the way you do the game. It could be in the system that is built behind the game that is very hard to see, actually. So the back end more than the front end. It could be also in your team composition, how passionate or dedicated they are in the game and the soul they create around the game. So I think it's really important when launching a game or making a game. Yes, at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is to make revenues. But what are you bringing here to the market? And focusing on this competitive advantage that only your team can have or can lock for a while. I think this is what also protects either the game, the way you've done it, or the IP. And you can see the games that are really easy to replicate and the games that are really hard to replicate. Like I would even say like Supercell games after the launch, it's really hard to copy because there's so much balancing, iteration, and even like the skills of a team behind. Good luck for someone to replicate the success to the level, you know? So I think it's doubling down really on your strengths as a team when you make a product, and you will always be seen a bit too early. And if you have, again, like in hyper casual or hybrid casual time sensitivity, then you'd rather launch quickly, right, before you are a copy and lose the market opportunity. So that depends really on the context.
Interesting. Yeah. So basically you have to, if you're developing a game that really has the kind of power that you should be developing for as long as you're developing, you have to assume or hope. I mean, maybe that's a flag for yourself. If you don't have the thing that makes it impossible to copy within a week, that somebody is seeing your title. Supercell's a great example. I mean, outside of just the game mechanics, they put there's such a world, there's such a personality to their games. It's not something that you could just create this, and this is why they've maintained such a, kind of their apps maintain those positions. So you have to be, I guess, honest with yourself, which is hard, I think, when you're especially when you're in product of, what makes your game special a lot of the times, but externally to the market, is it as special as you think it is?
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to come to. Do you think there's a way, how do you assess that as when do you know that you have something really worth dedicating time? How do you say to yourself, this is something that I know has the right potential. I know it's special. I know it's not replicable.
So part of the practices as well. So at the beginning, when you test marketability, it's already, I would say, one point of data you can use. And virality as well is a good indicator. So you have a game early on, like with the concept, the setting, etc., that there's a good word of mouth virality. So that's kind of some signals already that you have something interesting that brings something new in the market, like that freshness. And player feedback. I work a lot with player feedback. So for example, in our game, when we tested it for a while in soft launch, we added an in-game survey. So then we collected player feedback over time, like we have 1,000 answers by now. And we ask questions like, what is it that you like in the game, or what is the best part you like and why? And a lot of people, for example, would say, I've never seen a game like this. It's like its own category. Or I ask questions, what other similar games have you played that like our game? And people would name similar games, but people would say also, I cannot name any because it's unique in its way. So you start to have signals like, okay, we created actually here something special. You look also at the early traction, like D1 retention, playtime, daily playtime. So if you have a daily playtime that is above 45 minutes, it shows a very good sign of engagement when you don't have yet the metrics. When people really care, also you can look at community feedback. So for example, as well with the game we're making, we see in our community like people who are genuinely caring about helping, like almost they want this game to happen, so it's like, okay, take my time, I'm gonna give feedback, I will help you develop this game, like really I want this game to exist. So there's also like a caring from the community. So that are all like taking qualitative data, quantitative data, mixing in all, where you start to see signals that you created something that really in the eyes of your players bring value somehow to them. And that's really important. And I think when you create a product, whether it's in games or any other category, if you bring value in the perception of players, it will always translate in business, because that's what people buy in the end. They buy something they value. And if you're doing the same a little better than your neighbor, you're not necessarily adding values, but you have really to understand your players, like what do they care about enough that they would perceive this value in your product. Sometimes it's not about just, adding a new mechanic. Sometimes it's about the whole theme and setting. Sometimes it's about adding depth in the story, like a story they care about instead of a silly story that they have seen multiple times. So maybe, I don't know, I'm just throwing a ball here, but maybe people are tired about the cheating stories now. Maybe they want something a little deeper. And especially during COVID time, maybe people like other type of stories that are a bit more, positive and not so dramatic, So It's about really understanding what people value and care about, and making it in your product.
So how do you pick, how do you go about getting your early player market? Whether, designing the regions that you look at, if you're hand selecting, or if you just kind of throw out a beta and see who signs up, what's the right way to find an audience who's going to be indicative of who you're looking for without, maybe creating too much bias in a direction that you don't want to be moving in?
Yeah, that's really important as well, early development. So I work a lot with user research, and I've been using a user research company called 12 Traits. I think they're a bit known by now, and we worked with them very early on as well, where I didn't want to leave it to chance. So we made a game that we had an audience in mind. We even drew some personas, but they were made up by our team. And I was like, I am not a user researcher, and it's made up, they are not really real people. So I want to work with a user researcher where it's based on real data, things that we collected from games that exist. And what we did with them, we computed with them in a dashboard, basically all the games that we think are a benchmark. And then they could actually as well draw for us the persona out of these games, from the competition. And that helped us to identify, okay, this is our audience, and we don't have to guess it. They are in this demographic, that's the type of hobby, that's the thing they care about, these are the values they have, and we just build the whole product around it. And so when we had to test our marketing early, same thing here, we tried broad, but also we tried targeted to really what was our audience, and comparing the performance of the broad and targeted, and it's very clear actually that our game is very well designed for this audience. And it's important to know what you're doing with the marketing. If your game is mass market, like hyper casual, fine, just go broad. But it matters actually if your game is designed for a certain audience, and you wish but you didn't pick, of course, an audience that is too niche. So that's also what we wanted to make sure of by looking at market data, in this category. What is the potential size of the audience interested in that type of games? So looking at category. And then when you go out there marketing, you make sure that you go find these players, whether in the target market, like the country, or the demographic, or the point of interest, to make sure that it verified, have you designed the right game, at least for this audience at first. And of course, what you try to do later is to expand the audience, but it's really important at the beginning to make sure you had designed the right game for your core audience, the one that basically will make most of the spendings and revenues, and later expand.
I think that's also an area that's interesting. Once you've designed, you've had your launch, you've hit your success, you've found your group, you're kind of comfortable and you're stable. There's the question of how much does the game need to evolve, both in terms of our existing audience. Are they expecting something different? Obviously, the mobile space, it's saturated, it's heavy. One new game comes out and it can set expectations on, something else that's changed. Something as huge as COVID can hit and it changes the nature of the way people play games. How much do you feel that a product should be kind of pivoting towards expanding audiences versus kind of sticking and catering to its, how much are you willing to change a product just to reach newer audiences, or to optimize for an audience that maybe you've already been with for a long time?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think it's really important these days as well, if you want to be viable in the long term, to really think of the scalability. To think already of the scalability of the game. And of course, at the beginnings, you want to make sure that it covers enough of a market segment with your core product and core audience. But over time, this is what LiveOps is for as well. You start to expand in different point of interest. So I think a game for me that is fascinating, has started to grow in the charts, is Project Makeover. And originally, it looks like a makeup game, puzzle, etc. But then you have renovation, makeup, fashion, and it covers a lot of point of interest and overlap where different audience can come to the game through different points. And I think it's a great case. I actually hear of product and marketing. I like, makeup. This is the only game big game with makeup that is out there with a puzzle hybrid genre. And I actually like more renovation, like in Playrix games. Then I can also go to this game, or I like the dress up style. And then I go to this game and it has also its unique style. So I think a way you can expand and not necessarily pivot your product. I think it's important to keep the core, but really expand is like side features that will support different audiences that can have overlap. I don't know, if you need to add some puzzle elements, then you start to attract also a puzzle audience. If you start to add like the simulation part or social features, so it's really expanding with features that support the core of the game. I think that are important for viability. And then it allows some different, like I said, marketing strategy and messages where you can target some sub-segment of your game with a specific message about the social features or meeting friends. Or in the game, you can trade things with friends. Well, you cannot until you have the feature, but maybe some people are more interested in the community part in the game later when you want to expand.
Yeah, it's almost like it's kind of like mini soft launches in a sense. You have your core game and your core audience in your core game, and then it's, whether you're getting the signal more from marketing or more from, different product usage features. It's this idea of, hey, maybe there's something that is already within the game and within the appeal that we can expand further. And let's, I think I've seen a few examples where companies will test out features and kind of mini products as beta, as pre-launch, and just say, do we have enough appeal? Are people excited enough about this to download? Cool. So let's develop it. Or we have, 5 ideas. Let's figure out which one is most relevant for us to move ahead with, instead of, going with our gut and hoping for the best on the marketing and the performance side. All right. Awesome. Are you ready for the quick fire round?
Yes. So, tell me more about it.
I'll ask you questions we ask everyone. They're not so hard. It's just, first thing that comes to your mind. Don't be shy. Mm-hmm. All right. Ready? First one. If you could give one tip to somebody who's looking to break into this world of mobile growth, what would it be?
I'll play a lot of games and network, I would say. That's what comes to my mind.
I agree. It's I tell this to my family. I'm working when I'm playing games. It's work. It's not fun. Your favorite resource for mobile growth?
I follow the blog of Eric Suffer, Mobile Dev Demo. That's I think the main one. Yeah.
Who is the person in the mobile community that you would most want to take for lunch, and why? Assuming it was safe to go out to lunch.
Well, yeah, that's I don't know actually. I think I would like to probably talk to a lead of a project makeover. That's the team lead or the product lead of Project Makeover. That's the one that has I follow the product I followed recently.
All right. Well, if anybody from Project Makeover is listening, you should reach out to Sophie, get it set up. All right. Most important question. What is your favorite type of pancake?
Pancake with strawberry, blueberries, ice creams. Yeah. And maple syrup.
I'll get everything on there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
One last one. Where can people find you if they want to hear more, see what you're writing, see what you're up to?
On LinkedIn, mostly. Like, this is where I connect and post a lot of things. And also I have a platform of knowledge sharing that is called Rise and Play, where I put a masterclass on practices of leadership, where people also can find me and my content on this website.
Awesome. Sophie, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great having you.
Thank you. It was great to have a conversation as well.
And that was Mobile Growth and Pancakes. To find out more about StoreMaven and how we can improve App Store performance, visit storemaven.com. And then make sure to search for Mobile Growth and Pancakes in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at StoreMaven, thanks for listening.